Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Xiaomi and today I'm looking at the all-new Xiaomi Mi 11. Yeah, it's here. With its Snapdragon 888, improved camera, better display, and kind of a new look. But is it any good? Well, let's find out. Let's go. So here it is, the Mi 11. In the box, you'll find some instructions, a basic protective case, and a SIM card ejector tool. Below that, you'll find the Mi 11 itself, and well, that's it. First, let's look at this phone's specs. On front of the phone, it's got a 6.81-inch AMOLED display with a 3200 by 1440 pixels, 2K resolution, a 120 Hz refresh rate, 480 Hz touch input sample rate, and a brightness of 1500 nits. And yeah, that is very bright. In the display, it's got a fingerprint scanner to unlock the phone that actually has a built-in heart rate sensor in case you need it. And on top of the phone, you'll find its dot-designed front-facing camera that's got a 20 megapixel resolution. And this phone is the first to include the all-new Gorilla Glass Victus, which is supposed to be a lot stronger than any other glass. But I haven't tried to give it deeper grooves at level 7. On the inside, the Mi 11's got a 4600 mAh battery that supports 55 watts of wired charging and 50 watts wireless charging that also supports 10 watts reverse wireless charging to charge another phone with. It's got the all-new Snapdragon 888 processor, which should really give it a big performance boost, and that gives it support for the fastest Wi-Fi 6 and 5G networks. It comes with either 8 or 12 gigs of DDR5 RAM and either 128 or 256 gigs of storage. On the back of the phone, it's got a 3-lens camera setup with a 108 megapixel main camera with a bigger 1.33-inch sensor, 7p lens with an aperture of 1.85 that can also shoot 8K video. Then it's got a 13 megapixel 120 degrees ultra wide angle lens with an aperture of f2.4 and a 5 megapixel macro lens that is the equivalent of a 55 millimeter lens. On the side, it's got an on-off button, volume rockers, and on top it's got that IR blaster to use the phone as a remote controller. It's got double SIM card slot on the bottom of the phone next to the USB-C port, and it's got stereo speakers, which is no surprise. Xiaomi's been doing that a lot, but what is more of a surprise is that these are Harman Kardon speakers, which should give it a much better audio experience, but we'll listen to that in a little bit. Yeah, this is it, the highly anticipated Mi 11, but how is it in use? How fast is it? How is the audio? And, well, how are the photos and videos? That's what we're going to start with. So let's start with the camera. First, we've got the 108 megapixel main camera. This can shoot 108 megapixel photos, or it can shoot downscaled photos, and all of these photos are taken with that main camera. I went around the block here in Shanghai, and it's no surprise that during the day, all of these photos come out looking very good. They're sharp, they have very decent color rendering, and a good contrast. When it gets darker, this camera still held up well. It's not overly noisy, and most of these photos come out looking nice, actually. You can definitely tell that the larger image sensor definitely helps, as it's pretty much the same size sensor as we had on the Mi 10 Ultra, and well, it performs quite well. Then we've got video with the main camera, and that comes out looking pretty good. These are all shots taken with that main camera, all shot in 8K and in 4K. You can choose to shoot at 4K or HD to get a more stabilized video if you prefer that. It is a little bit more stabilized than shooting in 8K, although that's not too bad either, but 4K is definitely my preference. And when walking, you can see these shots are all very well stabilized. When it gets darker, the 8K video still looks pretty good, and also at night it did perform well. So overall, I gotta say that in terms of video, this camera actually did very, very well. One thing I definitely gotta point out is that when you're using the video at night, you do see a lot of artifacts because of the stabilization in post. So if I zoom into this part right here on this walking shot, you can definitely see the stabilization artifacts going on. So that is definitely not as visible during the day, but at night you can clearly see that it's trying to keep up with its stabilization. Then we've got the ultra wide angle lens, and this one is definitely a lot wider. Its photos come out looking decent. Per default though, it has this wider aspect ratio, which was a little bit weird, but during the day I definitely got some pretty good shots with it. When it gets darker, this one gets significantly more noisy. It's still kind of acceptable as it's processed quite well, but you can see they're definitely not as sharp as during the day. When it's really dark, like at night, I did find the ultra wide angle to be a lot more noisy, which becomes very obvious when you zoom into them. The video with the ultra wide angle lens is quite good though. That's actually quite funny. It can actually shoot in 4K, and that is pretty good. The shot seems very well stabilized, and it does give a nice wide angle look when you're moving the camera, so during the day it's pretty good. But when it gets darker, these definitely get a lot more noisy, and at night I found these to have a lot of noisy artifacts and get kind of gloomy and fuzzy. So you can see that in the shots right here. Like at night, this camera is definitely not the best, and I would always prefer to use the regular main camera, like shooting that in 4K. Then we've got a 5 megapixel macro lens. Well, sure, again, there's a 5 megapixel camera. And well, these photos come out a little bit better than I expected. There's definitely some improved processing going on, I guess, but well, in case you need it, it's here again, macro. Photos with the 20 megapixel selfie camera come out looking good, pretty much like we would have expected. And video with that front-facing camera is, again, very well stabilized, as we've seen with quite some Xiaomi phones recently. At night, this one is not that great. It gets very grainy and not that good looking, although the stabilization does hold up quite well. Then there's some pretty cool new features like this Hitchcock zoom that you can do on video. It's pretty awesome. It looks pretty cool. It's got the clone features with some new additions to freeze the frame. And then it's got all the other features like sky replacement. And then we've got that dual camera using both the front and back camera at the same time. So a lot of the stuff that we've seen in some of my recent reviews on the other Xiaomi phones as well. So now, how is this phone in use? Well, first off, it's fast. It's super fast. It's smooth. It reacts really, really smooth. I mean, at first I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit faster, but it actually does very, very well. It also scored very well in the benchmark tests that I've tried. And you can see here, like these are very good results. And in daily life performance, which is, that counts to me a lot more than benchmarking, it just did very, very well. And I noticed it at first when I installed some apps. Like the installation time was like half of what some of the other phones were doing. It was just a really nice experience. Now onto the display, which is surprisingly good. Again, it's really, and I mean really bright at its brightest setting. It's very sharp. It's got a high resolution. It's got a high refresh rate that you can set in the settings to be 120 Hertz. It's got that high touch sampling input, and it's just pleasing to look at. Again, this phone does have these curved corners again, and I really like it because they've got a pretty good accidental touch input rejection on the edges. So when you're holding it on the edges, it doesn't register that as a touch input, and that makes it very convenient. So the display is good, whether that's just looking at some YouTube videos like on my channel, which you probably should subscribe to if you haven't done that yet, but it's also great for gaming, and well, I had to try that out with some PUBG. And I could play this easily at the highest settings with the highest graphics, high-res audio, and set it to cinema visuals, and it just worked fine. Also, as it's an AMOLED display, I had the options for the always-on display, as you would expect, and that hasn't changed much. It just does what it needs to do. Then I did some tests to check it out with Wi-Fi and 5G. So that's something that Xiaomi was bragging with, and I mean, it did good. This is kind of hard to test as it will always be a limitation of your provider or the 5G network provider, but so far it did give me some pretty good results, so nothing to complain. Then I kind of want to mention that there's going to be an upcoming MIUI 12.5, which will definitely enhance this phone, and it will, for example, allow you to connect two Bluetooth headsets to this specific phone, which is such a welcome feature. This phone right now is still running on MIUI 12, so I will come back on that one with a follow-up video soon as it's getting a MIUI 12.5, and I'm definitely very interested in checking that out. Hey, what's up? It's Wick for Xiaomify, and this is what I sound like talking straight into the Mi 11. How does it sound? Well, let's find out. So the audio sounds good. It's wide, it's full, it's really giving you that immersive experience. I mean, I find it very hard to say something negative about this phone. For the last week that I've been using this phone, I've really been liking it. So what are my thoughts on the Mi 11 and what do I think that was a little bit disappointing? First, I love the hand feel, the looks. I really like the curved display and even the camera. I don't know, for some reason it just looks nice. So looks, definitely check mark. I really like the looks. Then the display, I love it. It's high res, it's got a high refresh rate, it's super bright, it's very vibrant, and I mean, it's just good. Can't say anything else about it. And then I really like the speed of this phone, as it's got that new Snapdragon 888, which will be the flagship processor for the coming year, and it just performs very, very good. I had the Mi 10 Pro in comparison, and this one just feels faster. So the Mi 11 in experience feels faster than the Mi 10 Pro. So just so you know. In the camera department, the phone is doing very well. It's not as mind-blowing as the leap that we saw with the Mi 10 Ultra, but it's kind of close to that. The Mi 11 is also a lot cheaper than the Mi 10 Ultra, so they get similar performance in the main camera, and better processing performance is actually kind of good. I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see a much bigger camera upgrade, but this one does seem to push it for this line of phone and for its current price category, so it does pretty well. I must say that I'm really not sold on a 5 megapixel macro lens. I think it's useless for probably 90% of its users, and I would have totally preferred a 20 megapixel ultra wide angle over a 13 megapixel wide angle and a 5 megapixel macro lens, which most of you probably will never ever use. Then audio. I really like the audio experience. I didn't have too high expectations, but seeing it was an upgrade in speakers, I really actually liked it, and the stereo sound on the Mi 11 it's impressive. It's good. Battery life so far has been very good for me as well. It held up the whole day without any problems, and I actually kind of like how they went with 50 watts and 55 watts charging, as the 120 watts charging on the Mi 10 Ultra might have been a little bit too much and it might affect the battery performance a lot faster. So in my opinion, 50 and 55 watts charging speed is just fine with me, and it already charges up the phone very fast. I think on average was like 45 or 50 minutes, so it's pretty good. I also kind of expected the front-facing camera to be below the display, as Xiaomi has allegedly been working on that for a long time, so I was kind of hoping that the Mi 11 wouldn't have a pinhole camera, but well, it does. Anyway, so far I really love the Mi 11. It's a great phone, but there's quite a few small things that I do want to add. Yes, this is the initial launched phone in China, and that's the one that I bought. And I expect we might see a global launch of this phone in the next month, maybe 2 months. So if you want to pick it up in your local store, you might have to wait a few weeks. I'm also kind of expecting there will be a Mi 11 Pro series, and this might be the big change with the faster charging, maybe bigger battery, a much improved camera system with perhaps an 8P lens, and I would hope for a very impressive zoom lens instead of the macro lens. Something a little bit more similar to the Mi 10 Ultra that we had here in China, and maybe even better camera stabilization on 8K. So if there will be a Mi 11 Pro sometime soon, I do expect and hope it to have some bigger improvements. Also, I would have loved to see the leather back model that they've launched, but that one wasn't for sale just yet. So if they will launch the leatherback model globally, I will definitely try to get my hands on that one. So that's about it for the Mi 11, which came out in China for around 4,000 and 4,700 RMB, which I think is a very fair price for this phone. But I will definitely come back when there's going to be a global release, and I'm definitely going to come back on this if and when there's going to be a Mi 11 Pro. So, what do you guys think of the Mi 11 thus far? Is this a phone that you're interested in picking up? Are you going to wait for the Mi 11 Pro? Let me know what you guys think down here in the comment section below this video. Don't forget to leave a little like to show me that you've liked it. And, well, if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, know that you probably should. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see y'all soon. Peace!